We will now start our interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea. We will first hear Ms. Sheila Keetharuth, who will present her first report to the Council pursuant to Resolutions 20/20 and 21/1 and contained in document A/AHC/23/53. Mr. Keetharuth, you have 10 minutes for your presentations.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to address you in my capacity as the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea. I was humbled to be entrusted with the responsibility as the first Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea when I took up my mandate on the 1st of November 2012. In my view, the mandate offers the potential for Eritrea to cooperate in efforts to ensure that long-lasting solutions can be found to address the human rights challenges in the country. Since my appointment, I have endeavored to implement the mandate in a constructive, transparent, independent, and impartial manner. My main objective on taking up the mandate was and continues to be how to contribute to strengthening the respect for human rights of all Eritreans. I welcome and I'm thankful for the 3 occasions I've been able to meet with the Eritrean government representatives. The latest one was in fact yesterday to discuss the report. However, I regret Eritrea's rejection of the mandate and the fact that I was not invited to visit the country. In the implementation of my mandate, I have focused on giving a voice to Eritreans who have been victims of human rights violations in their home country. Accessing survivors of human rights violation having fled Eritrea to neighboring countries became a challenge as the reporting deadlines approached. For that purpose, I traveled to Djibouti and Ethiopia in May this year, where I interviewed Eritrean refugees in camps in both capitals about the situation of human rights in Eritrea. I would like to thank the governments of Djibouti and Ethiopia for their invitation and cooperation and flexibility during my visit. Excellencies, based on my findings, I'm extremely concerned about the human rights situation in Eritrea. The prevailing situation in the country is characterized by extrajudicial killings and forced disappearance and incommunicado detention, arbitrary arrest and detention, torture, and inhumane prison conditions. The use of incommunicado detention can only be condoned in exceptional circumstances for the shortest possible term, to be duly communicated to the person thus detained. Extended periods of incommunicado detention seem to be used in Eritrea as a technique to obtain information or as a punishment. From testimonies collected and from information available, incommunicado detention for prolonged periods appears to be the norm and not the exception. Incommunicado detention for prolonged periods is a breach of international law and can never be justified because of the potential harmful consequences, causing severe mental or physical pain or suffering. Incommunicado detention must stop. The situation is also alarming with regard to mass roundups, forced conscription, and the indefinite national service, as well as the countrywide arming and military training of civilian population, which started last year, according to reports. Excessive militarization is affecting the very fabric of Eritrean society and its core unit, the family. The indefinite national service is depriving the women and men of Eritrea of their most productive years. Those conscripted into national service are forced to work without adequate remuneration. They're unable to provide for their families, which exacerbates the living conditions in a society where many people struggle to meet their basic needs. Many of those I interviewed told me that their families would be unable to live in dignity without direct contributions from families and friends abroad. Severe curtailment of freedom of movement, opinion, expression, assembly, association, and the right to freedom of religion warrant serious concern. The restrictions of these rights, which are the very cornerstone of democratic societies, create a climate of fear fueled by rumors, propaganda, and suspicion. The result is an all-encompassing feeling of fear and distrust, even within families. The widely reported attempted coup, which was staged earlier this year in January, illustrates how access to information is tightly controlled. Accurate information on the event is still not available, but there are many reports of or allegations of extrajudicial killings and disappearances, and which we haven't been able to look into more concretely. The fate of people who disappeared remains unknown. The arbitrary use of power by the state is violating the most fundamental principles of the rule of law. This is coupled with the absence of accountability mechanisms to bring those responsible for human rights violations to justice. While I commend Eritrea's efforts for being on track in reaching 6 out of 8 MDGs targets, the question remains, at what cost to those who are supposed to benefit from the very improvements and to the population at large? The alarming human rights situation in Eritrea is triggering a constant stream of refugees to neighboring countries. Although there is a shoot-to-kill policy targeting those attempting to flee, many Eritreans citizens have fled over the past decades. In 2012, the total Eritrean population of concern to UNHCR amounted to 305,808 persons. The numbers are on the rise, with more than 4,000 Eritreans fleeing the country every month, despite the extreme dangers along escape routes and an unknown future. During my visit to refugee camps in Ethiopia, I met a large number of unaccompanied children crossing the border, some as young as 7 or 8. Many leave home without the knowledge of their families, mostly as they fear the forced conscription into indefinite national service. In my view, the increasing number of these unaccompanied minors not only poses major protection challenges, but is indicative of the scale of despair these children are facing at home. I acknowledge Eritrea's active participation in the Universal Periodic Review of 2009-2010. The government has reportedly initiated a follow-up process, Eritrea's second Universal Periodic Review in January 2014, will provide another opportunity to engage on human rights situation with the Human Rights Council, and it will be interesting to see which concrete steps Eritrea has taken to honor its commitment under the UPR. Distinguished delegates, before turning to my recommendations, I would briefly comment on the way forward. During the initial period of my mandate, I concentrated on gathering information on human rights violations from a broad spectrum of interlocutors, but more specifically from survivors of human rights violations. The aim was to ensure that decisions about human rights are made from an informed position. The approach has been to try to open channels of communication with the government, of Eritrea while taking into account the various challenges and limitations. Yes, I will conclude just to say that there's the three areas which would be to look into for the future would be to respect, protect and fulfill internationally recognized human rights standards, to restore and respect the rule of law, to ratify international human rights standards, and to cooperate with United Nations and regional human rights mechanisms. The recommendations are in the report in more detail, so I will not elaborate at this point. But one thing I would like to say to end, it's that my humble plea to the government of Eritrea is to allow me to assess the human rights situation on the ground, personally, by granting me access to the country. Additionally, I would welcome the opportunity to engage in a frank and open dialogue with the government of Eritrea to discuss the recommendations which are in the report, as well as a range of issues and challenges linked to the full realization of human rights in Eritrea. I remain available for such a dialogue. Thank you.